So thank you so much, Amy, for joining us here
Yeah.
at the London blog. So we would like to hear more about the questions that are coming up for ethicists regarding robotics. You made a very excellent talk yesterday regarding the home and
Yeah.
the challenges we have ahead.
Right, right. So I should start by saying that robot ethics is really looking at, the design, the development, the use, the regulation, the implementation of robots. So it's not just reflecting on robots once we've made them and then thinking, oops, now what do we do? What are the ethical issues? So it's really the entire life cycle of the robot. And that is in particular what the Foundation for Responsible Robotics is trying to address, to try and, look at this concept of what does responsible robotics mean. So some of the ethical issues have to do with, transparency between companies and consumers. So what is happening in a company? And, an example of this is large companies that make the Roomba robot. And there has been talk about, potentially this company selling the data that the robot collects, the maps or other data that the robot could collect to other companies like Amazon, so that the two robots in the home could interact with one another, could share data with one another. And of course, this can be beneficial for multiple reasons, one being the efficiency of the robotic system. So we can see some actual benefits, but on the flip side, we have to wonder, will the company be asking permission? What will this permission be like? Will it be a sort of terms and conditions? Will people read this? Will they be allowed to proceed with using the robot if they don't agree to this kind of thing? So really transparency between the company and the rest of the world, not just the consumer, the academics, the policymakers. That's one of the main issues that we need to look at today. We also need to look at, joined up thinking. So it shouldn't be just industry pushing forward with innovation. There should be conversations happening between industry, policymakers, academics, and the general public. And those are the kinds of things that we try to do at the Foundation for Responsible Robotics, to raise public awareness, to hold events where we can bring these multiple stakeholders together, and also to try and facilitate transparency between companies and consumers.
And your membership base then now includes manufacturers as well, right? I think.
Right. So we have a range of different members. We have an executive advisory board that has industry players as well as academics. We have policymakers who are involved in the different activities and things like that we do. And then we have a general membership. So for people who want to be involved in the activities or to support the foundation in some way, you can sign up and become a member and join one of our working groups to help explore or reflect on one particular application or area of robotics.
So what does that mean, the new regulatory framework that's going to be in place in May of 2018 by European Union regarding the portability and the ownership of your data? How does that impact the robotics industry?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not an expert on actually this portability regulation that you're speaking about, so I'm not sure that I can say to what end. I do know that the Commission would have to explicitly say how this would relate to robotics, and right now the Commission is responding to recommendations from the European Parliament. So the European Parliament has actually made specific recommendations for robotics and AI, and now the Commission must respond to those specific recommendations. And ethics is a part of these recommendations. So we'll see how they want to tailor their regulations towards robotics in the near future, I would imagine.
So your background is in
Cell biology.
Right, or policy?
Actually, my background is in cell biology, which is, as one does. And while I was doing my undergraduate in Canada, I was a research assistant at a robotics institute. So I was one of the first to explore surgical robots. And I was part of a research team where we were not doing ethics and philosophical issues. We were testing the network variables of the telesurgical system, the Zeus telesurgical system, and the Da Vinci surgical robot. And it was during that time that I started to have conversations with my boss about how do surgeons feel about this technology, how do the patients feel about this technology. And it was, that was back in 2006, and that's when I decided to pick up and try and study the combination between the technical, the engineering, and these ethical and societal questions.
A lot has been said lately about women in tech, how it is important that greater participation of women in tech. What would you recommend for women who are interested in engineering, robotics, and what pathways or policy making related to science? What would be the pathways, and what would you recommend young women who are just out of high school, who are thinking about college?
Right. So, and I should also say that I am a women in tech sort of on the periphery because I'm in the humanities. I'm in, the ethics and philosophical dimension, but I'm doing a reflection on technology. So I'm not working in an industrial setting where we're making robots. But what I would say is, I started in music theater, and then I moved into cell biology, and then I moved into ethics. It's really about, being critical and reflective on what you're studying, being open to learning new things, and being brave to switch, not thinking that once you've taken one sort of career path that you're stuck with that. If this isn't making you passionate anymore, then you change. Then you look for something else that you're really passionate and interested in studying, and you go for it. You go and study it. Something that I think is really important, though, when we're having this discussion about diversity in the workplace, and in particular facilitating women and girls to study these subjects, I think it's important to find role models and mentors, to look for women in these fields that you can look up to, that you really appreciate and think that what they're doing is fantastic. And that's one of the things that we want to do at the Foundation for Responsible Robotics. In September 2018, we plan on hosting an event called Celebrating Women in Robotics, and we want to showcase the amazing work that women have been doing and are doing in robotics, and also to put them on the stage so that younger girls can come and see and look and point and say, I want to do that. That's really cool. I want to be making robots, or I want to be studying law and robotics. So it's really important to find people that you look up to, and to, have the courage to switch if you're not passionate about what you're doing anymore.
And that brings another question too. I think we talk a lot about technology, and in one of the opening speeches this week at Web Summit, there was talk about women and humans are important, right? So what seems like somewhere along the way, sometimes we forget, right? Technology should be at the service of making a better society, create a better life for all. So that brings the question too of having people from the humanities working in the sciences, working in projects together, bringing other perspectives, right? No, that's a fantastic point. And that's something that usually when I'm giving a talk, I start off by saying that ethics is really, it's the study of the good life, what it is and how we can achieve it. And so that means when you talk about ethical issues related to robotics, it's not just about privacy and safety and security. Those are, of course, very important issues to discuss, but ethics requires that you have a conversation about, where does this robot or where does this technology fit into our concept of the good life? How does it impact us, or how does it actually make us achieve what we consider to be constitutive of the good life? And companionship robots are a really interesting example to look at or to think about when you talk about the good life, because having relationships is what makes us feel important, and it teaches us skills like compassion and empathy and patience. So having relationships in your life is really important for yourself as an individual, but also for the sense of feeling that you're experiencing a good life. And what does it mean when we create a robot, a kind of companionship robot that could replace these social interactions? What kind of an impact is that going to have on how we feel overall, but also on how we're able to develop these important ethical character traits like patience, empathy, and compassion? So it's a wonderful question. How do we look at technology and remember that it's supposed to be providing a service to us to help us experience the good life? Another aspect that you touched upon is robotics for healthcare, right? I think we're just starting to see more and more. There's so many tasks that could be assigned to robots. What do you see are the challenges too in terms of the medical field, the medical applications of robotics, which already has quite a bit, of course, in surgery and so on, assisting surgeons and so on. So I think what's really important, and this isn't restricted to healthcare robots in general, but it's very important or relevant for healthcare robots. We have to be careful about what kind of role we delegate to the robot. So there's a big
difference in having a robot or an AI system that's responsible for distinguishing between a cancerous mole and a benign or a non-cancerous mole. And to have that as an assistive device for the dermatologist or for the physician to be able to say with, a statistically significant level of accuracy, this mole is cancerous and that mole is not cancerous, and then the doctor can make their decision based on their own practical judgment with the assistance of the robot. Then, in other instances, you look at what happens when you completely delegate a role or a decision-making process to a robot. That's a huge difference between, who is responsible, who is liable for decisions that are actually being made. Or when you look at something, a task like lifting, you could have a robot that is completely autonomous and goes in and lifts the patient and replaces the nurse in his or her role. Alternatively, you could have an exoskeleton robot, so a robot that the nurse is wearing, and then you maintain the presence of the nurse in that role. You maintain important aspects like eye contact, you build a trusting relationship, and these are all necessary elements to make sure that the patient complies with their care plan, takes their medication, is honest about their symptoms. So really, design choices between a replacement robot or an assistive or enhancing robot are really important to understand, what kind of role you're giving to the robot and what that looks like in the overall healthcare practice or domain.
Thank you very much.
Of course, thank you for having me.
With you.
Thanks.